73 seconds. You're in the crew seat of the Space Shuttle Challenger at 48,000 feet of altitude, 3 minutes into the flight. And you just heard something that shouldn't be there. A crack. Not from inside your helmet, not from inside the cabin, from somewhere structural, from some part of the vehicle you're riding. The engines are still roaring. The acceleration is still pressing you into your seat. But you heard it. Click. And the expression on Commander Francis Scabby's face changed before anything else did. It was January 28, 1986. It was 11:38 in the morning, local time at Cape Canaveral, Florida. The temperature that morning was at 28 degrees Fahrenheit, the coldest of any launch in the American space program up to that point. Engineers at Morton Thiokol, the company that manufactured the solid rocket boosters, had spent the previous night trying to delay the launch. They knew the O-ring seals, the rubber rings at the joints of the booster segments, were not designed to work at temperatures that low. Cold rubber goes stiff. A stiff O-ring doesn't seal completely. The NASA management decided the risks were acceptable. Challenger launched. You were on board with 6 other people. Francis Scabby, commander. Michael Smith, pilot. Judith Resnick, mission specialist. Ellison Onizuka, mission specialist. Ronald McNair, mission specialist. Gregory Jarvis, payload specialist. And Krista McAuliffe, a teacher from Concord, New Hampshire. Selected from more than 11,000 applicants for NASA's Teacher in Space program. 17 million American students were watching the launch live that morning, many from school auditoriums with real-time broadcast feeds. The first 73 seconds of the flight were normal. You passed through the sound barrier. You went through max Q, the point where the vehicle's speed combined with atmospheric density creates the greatest structural stress on the airframe. You got through it. Everything was nominal. At the exact 73rd second, the O-ring at the field joint of the right solid rocket booster failed completely. The seal that kept the combustion gases inside the booster ceased to exist. A solid propellant flame operating at over 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit began escaping through the joint. It reached the external liquid hydrogen tank. The external tank held 149,000 gallons of propellant. It tore apart in a fraction of a second. From the outside, the live broadcast cameras recorded a white and orange explosion, a fireball expanding at enormous speed. The shuttle fragmented inside the fireball. The whole world saw it at the same time. But that's where the story most people know ends. And the story most people don't know begins. The crew cabin of Challenger was not destroyed in the explosion. It was built from reinforced aluminum and titanium designed to survive pressurization, depressurization, and moderate impacts. When the propellant tanks exploded and the solid rocket boosters broke apart, the force vectors that hit the cabin were violent, but not sufficient to destroy it immediately. Cabin was catapulted upward and outward from the explosion. The crew cabin of Challenger rose, separated from the rest of the vehicle, to a maximum altitude of approximately 60,000 feet above the altitude of the explosion. And then it began to fall. 2 minutes and 45 seconds. That's how long the cabin took to fall from 60,000 feet to the Atlantic Ocean. NASA investigated the state of the cabin during the fall. Coot. The investigation took months and included analysis of flight data, analysis of parts recovered from the ocean, and analysis of recordings. What they found was disturbing in a very specific way. At least 3 of the personal egress air packs, called PEEPs, were activated after the explosion. PEEPs are emergency devices installed at each crew member's seat. They don't activate automatically, they require manual action. Someone, after the explosion, activated the PEEPs. Crane NASA identified that Michael Smith's PEAP had been activated. Judith Resnick's PEEP had been activated. Ellison Onizuka's PEEP had been activated. Each PEAP contained enough air for approximately 6 minutes of breathing. NASA could not determine with absolute certainty whether any crew member was conscious for the entire duration of the fall. The explosive decompression at the altitude of the explosion could have caused loss of consciousness. But the activated peeps indicate that at least some crew members were conscious and functional immediately after the explosion, long enough to take a deliberate physical action. You are falling. You don't know exactly what happened. You know that something catastrophic occurred because the cabin pressurization shifted and the acceleration. You were feeling changed direction and you were no longer climbing. But the cabin is still intact around you. The walls are still there. The instruments, some of them, still respond. Outside, 17 million children and adults are watching the fireball dissipate in the blue Florida sky. They're watching the two solid rocket boosters separated and intact continue their parabolic trajectories before being destroyed by mission control with remote detonation radio signals. They're watching the white smoke trail the explosion left in the sky. They can't see the cabin. It's too small and it's falling. The fall from 60,000 feet takes 2 minutes and 45 seconds. In free fall, without propulsion, a mass falls at the speed physics allows. The cabin had limited aerodynamics. It didn't glide. It fell with the trajectory of a heavy object in free fall. Terminal velocity, acceleration building. The impact with the Atlantic surface was estimated by investigators at speeds close to 207 miles per hour. The cabin was found by the recovery ship on the ocean floor at 92 feet of depth, 20 miles from the coast of Cape Canaveral. It was intact enough to be identified. The bodies of all 7 crew members were recovered. The medical findings on the causes of death were not fully made public by NASA. What was disclosed indicated that the causes of death were consistent with high-velocity impact with water, not with the explosion itself, implying that at least part of the crew was alive at the moment of impact. How long any of them were conscious? NASA cannot say with certainty. The physics of the environment, 60,000 feet altitude with partial or full cabin pressurization depending on the state of the cabin seals at the moment of the explosion made conscious survival for the full duration of the fall uncertain. The investigators concluded they could not determine whether there was suffering during the fall. What they could state is that death from impact was immediate. Krista McAuliffe was 37. She was a history and social studies teacher. She had 2 kids. Scott was 9. Carolyn was 6. She was going to teach from space to live lessons broadcast to students. The first was called The Ultimate Field Trip. She never gave the lesson. Ronald McNair was a physicist. He played saxophone. He was the second African-American astronaut to go to space. He was The Rogers Commission, formed by President Reagan to investigate the accident, concluded in June of 1986 that the decision to launch that day was a management error. The Thiokol engineers who recommended delay were overruled. NASA's decision-making system had prioritized schedule over safety. The launch had been delayed 4 times for weather and technical reasons. There was pressure to launch. They launched. Roger Boystely, one of the Thiokol engineers who spent the night before the launch trying to stop it, never psychologically recovered from the accident. He gave testimony to the Rogers Commission against his own company and against NASA. He developed post-traumatic stress disorder. He spent years after the accident being invited to speak at companies about engineering ethics, about what happens when an engineer knows something is wrong and is not heard. The space shuttle program was suspended for 2 years and 6 months. When it returned with Discovery in September of 1988, it launched in front of fewer students in schools. The enchantment had changed. In 2003, 17 years after the Challenger, Columbia disintegrated on re-entry. 7 more astronauts. Another technical warning ignored. Another group of engineers who had tried to say something. 73 seconds. You heard the crack. The other crew members heard it too. The expression changed and then the physics began. If this video puts you in that seat for the 73 seconds that changed the American space program, subscribe. We tell the stories that textbooks put in 1 sentence and reality took 2 minutes and 45 seconds to finish.